Welcome to the Uncomfortable is Okay podcast. Today I am joined by Ian Harvey. He's a bit of a rebel. He's a serial entrepreneur who has actually been working as the founder of Collective Intelligence for the last 15 years. I was introduced to Harv by my good mate, James Brummer Taylor, and we had a chat, must be a couple of months ago now, Harv, and really enjoyed that conversation. So I'm excited to have you here on the podcast today to talk about collective intelligence and all other sorts of things in the realm of discomfort. Welcome, mate.
Good morning, Chris. Thanks for inviting me. And we've both got sort of croaky voices from you with COVID and me from a party over the weekend. So we'll
Oh,
fight
nice.
through it.
Yeah, I think yours is probably a little bit more fun than mine has been. It's all right. It might be a short podcast, everyone, if our voices give out. Harv, I always like to start with, where are you from, mate? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a little place called Mangatanoka in North Wairarapa, and I grew up behind the Tui Brewery, and I used to look out at the tower of the brewery through my childhood. And it was a fascinating place to live because it's in rural New Zealand, but surrounded by a whole lot of brewers and people, lots of English, Scottish, Irish, working at the brewery. And so my family started the brewery in 1903, and it was a very, very colourful upbringing. So rural, lived on a wee farm, and it was a very unique upbringing.
Nice. That's interesting. I was not expecting that, actually.
There you go.
Brilliant. Do you remember from those early years that have kind of pushed you down the path that you're on today?
Oh, okay. So this is a big question. So I had my cousin and his wife were murdered, and their baby was left in the house to perish, and it became New Zealand's biggest murder case. Still is. So called the Crew murder. So Harvey Crew was my first cousin. And I was 10 when that happened. I remember the phone call coming through, and they were looking for the bodies, which took 3 months to find. That turned the family upside down, and it was a pretty traumatic time. Back in those days, that was 1970. Back in those days, there was one murder a year, basically, in New Zealand. There would have been more than that, but they were very, very rare. And that really derailed my family. And there were two, and then it became known as the Arthur Allen Thomas case, and it went on and on and on. There were two High Court trials, and Arthur Allen Thomas was locked up and accused of the murder and found guilty twice, and there were appeals carried on. 9 years later, there was a Royal Commission of Inquiry, and Thomas was pardoned and was compensated. And that was the toughest time for me, because my family had lived in this vacuum of disinformation through that process. And I became very, very anti the establishment when I turned 19, when he was let out. I remember it was a Friday night. I was shepherding up in Taihape, and he was freed from jail. And even the Royal Commission inquiry wasn't a great process. The police were found guilty of corruption, planting evidence. I actually got an apology from the police 10 years ago, finally, after 40 years. And that really had a big effect on me, Chris, from lots of different ways. And it's interesting, you don't know what effect things have on you at the time, right? And the initial reaction when I was 19, up until then, I'd been a pretty good boy, and I had looked after my family through that time. So the first effect it had was I've never liked leadership. I've never liked the term leadership, because it was terrifying for me. And it was terrifying because my sisters were older than me. They left the country reasonably quickly after the murders to get out of the country, and I was left with parents who were already struggling. And so I stepped up at that point and did a lot of looking after the family, not just for my parents, but for others as well. And I realized that at any point that I was in a position of leadership, I knew we were in the shit. because I was a 13, 14, 15-year-old boy trying to keep the family together. And so leadership was always a terrifying thing for me. And I've never, ever wanted to be in a leadership spot. The irony is now we consider the leadership development program, which is sort of ironic. But the thing that burns in me, Chris, most of all, is getting good information. So my family were destroyed not by the murders, but from misinformation. So there was conflicting information all the time, caused by the police and the corruption. Okay, and even the trials were a shambles. So I'm really passionate about people getting clean information, clean data from unbiased sources. And that's why the diversity is so important for us with collective intelligence, because we take the biases out. And our methodology is to create diverse teams to make sense of complexity. And that goes right back. And I've only just found this out in the last 4 or 5 months through the help of a genius man called Michael Philpott, who helped me dig into what was driving me with this, because he kept on saying, why are you doing this? And I'd give him this or that. He said, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. And he kept on digging. It took 90 minutes and I was really agitated by the end until he uncovered the thing. And I came back to that Friday night of just how frustrated I was that for those 9 years, my family could not get clear information. And because of that, not being able to get good information, we had fighting within the family. We had nobody, you just couldn't rest. There was no rest. There was no satisfaction. There was no peace. And so we could never put it to peace. And it's still not completely at peace, because the police, even when Arthur Allen Thomas was let out, would not reopen the case. So the Crown's saying it's over, and the police go, it's not over, and the police are going, it's over. So today, the case is still unsolved and closed. So it's no news. So there you go, long answer to a simple question. That's what drives me, Chris, is that I get great delight in people getting great information they can trust. And it's amazing what people can do when they get really clear information.
Thank you for sharing that, Harv. But interested, so you found out that this is the reason, this is the big driver for you in the last 4 or 5 months. Collective intelligence has been rolling for 15 years. What was the driver at the start to get that going?
To get it going was very simple. It goes back to 1994, Chris. And I was a company director of a number of companies. I was a farmer by trade, but I've always been interested in other things. I've always been involved in other businesses. And that goes back to the days of the brewery and the different influences. So I've always been exposed to lots of other things. And so I've been involved in multiple industries and export and a whole range of stuff. So I found myself as a young man, I was 32 to 34, and I was a director of a number of companies, both public and private. And I was fascinated that the key people, you sit there on the board, and people would come and present, to the board, the CEOs and the key people. And as long as the numbers were fine, then the board's fine, because the board looks after the stakeholders. And I think it was because of my age, and I'm sitting there going, but these people aren't spending enough time with their family. They're not spending enough time with their children. Their health isn't great. They're not resting enough. They're drinking too much. They're not developing. And I realized success is a really tough thing, because the downside with success is that you end up doing the same thing over and over again. And sometimes your development can slow down because you're on the treadmill. And so I was really concerned that sending these key people off to, and I'm not using the word CEO because it's not always CEOs, but sending the key people off to short courses doesn't make any difference. They might get all excited and stimulated, but they come back and they get on the treadmill, and, it can be weeks and all that's just disappeared. And so I wanted to try something. I wanted to try the farm discussion group model, which was really familiar to me, where farmers put a group together and we would share technical ideas and support each other to push new boundaries. And they're really effective. And I thought, and they work because farmers don't compete with each other, right? And when I say, I mean, they'll compete to lift production and things, but they don't have to protect their market or any of that sort of kind. So they'll share openly. So I thought, I'm going to try and set up a non-competitive business group. So I got business people from 8, 9 different industries and sectors and put them in a team and try to set up like a farm discussion group, but without the farmers in it, and put these CEOs in there. And I never intended to be involved in it, Chris. I went then looking for a facilitator to facilitate it, and nobody wanted a bar of it because they said, "What's the program?" I said, "I don't really know. We'll just roll with it and see how it goes." And then the guy I really wanted to run it was a guy, Johnny Heslop. And Johnny was a stunning facilitator, and he said, "Harv," this was his motivational speech to me. He said, "Harv, they'll all be wankers. You're a wanker. You run it." And I went, "Okay." And he gave you 2 hours training, and I became a facilitator. Most terrifying morning of my life. And I can hear them coming up these steps, and I'm in the toilet dry reaching. And I'm going, I don't even need to do this. Why am I doing this? But a couple of things happened through that process. And that one of them, they came, I was dry reaching, they're coming up. I walked into the room, I just came clean. I said, "Look, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to try my best and facilitate it." And they liked the fact that it was pretty casual, and they really responded to that. That team stayed together for 7 years. It was far more successful than I ever imagined. The issues were very, very common. And we just visited each other's businesses about 3 times a year, and it worked. And they got a huge amount of support from each other because they could share. Confidentiality was a big thing, still is now. It came apart after 7 years because I was too busy farming, but something seeded in me what would happen. So I got sick of farming actually 17 years ago. I was doing some other stuff, and I had this itch. What would happen if I tried to do this properly? So it started off 15 years ago based just on business people, and now it's any industry. So it's always been about diversity, but diversity in 1994 was 7 white men and 1 or 2 white women, and now it's 52% female, 16% of our members are Māori, the other 10 or 11% are other ethnic backgrounds, and the balance is youngest members being 19, so at the moment it's 21, oldest is 74, and I'm just fascinated with the power of diversity to cut through complexity. So there's always been a big pastoral care element. It has been an incredibly difficult journey, Chris, because I've liked copying things, and I haven't been able to copy anything apart from the farm discussion group back in 1994. And there's been plenty of times that I've wanted to give up, and I haven't, because of that burning piece underneath that I didn't understand what kept me going. And I think that's a critical piece for me. And that was the thing that Michael Philpott was digging into of, "Mate, why are you still doing this?" And so I've only just learned that recently.
Mm. Why do you think diversity cuts through complexity so well?
Short answer is I don't know, because I could bullshit and say I do know, but it's a science that I don't fully appreciate, and I'm not sure anybody else does.
Mm.
So
If you were to postulate.
I'll postulate. And so I'm starting with that because I don't want to sound like I know, because I don't know. But this is what we see is that, and I'm going to frame this up with diversity works if the teams are curated. So curation is really important. and getting the design of the team is really important, and we don't always get it right. So, and I share this openly because it's a piece of our IP that I love sharing, because I would love more people to understand this. In the room, you need to have some people who know, and in the room, you need to have some people who don't know, and you've got to have the balance, right? So if you have a whole lot of people who don't know, it doesn't work. If you have a room full of people who do know, it doesn't work. So you've got to get the balance between I do know and I don't know, and they need to have an equal say. The people in the room do need to be competent. So that's important, because being naive is great, but when you're naive from a competent base, it makes a difference. So competence is really important in a diverse team. You could have a diverse team of people who are not competent, and it loses the power. So competence is really important. They need to be curious about people who don't think like them. So we talk about like-hearted. It's not about like-minded. So disagreeing is really important. Okay. And that cuts through the complexity. And being okay with discomfort. So our teams often have huge amount of discomfort when they don't know, they don't agree, and they don't know where they're going. And the longer you can sit on that and keep talking, and I love it when solutions come and we don't give advice. Often the outcome is a question or it is a possibility. So we don't consult, we don't tell people what to do, but it's really important to being able to sit in that not knowing piece as long as possible and allow people to rumble with that. And using Breno Brown's terminology is being able to rumble with, I don't know, we don't know. And the longer you can hold there, the better.
Do you have any tips for staying there for a long time? Because a lot of us, when we do have, like, we're certainty seekers. We want certainty because it removes a whole lot of uncomfortable feelings. But often, if we seek certainty, then we'll just latch on to the first superficial answer that comes to us. Whereas actually, we need to go deeper, like you did with Michael Philpott, and for that 90 minutes of agitation. Like, how do you stay sitting there? How do you kind of embrace
So
that uncertainty?
I think one of the things we need to give up is status and looking good. Okay. So I think sometimes, we go through a schooling system that you get points for having the answer, right? Can you imagine sitting down an exam and go, hey, great question. Yeah, don't know. Come back to you. Right? It's so certainly the education I got brought up and was, oh, I know the answer. Good boy, you've got the answer. So, and I think as you progress in your career of latching on to, I know shit, so I've got status, I'm the boss or whatever, giving up on that and being okay with that is really important. And the other one's practice. The wonderful thing with our teams is we've got a great team of facilitators, and each team's facilitated, and allowing the teams not to come up with the answer, but to to get people to, questions are far more powerful than answers. Questions are magic. And then coaching people, just like you're doing now, right? That's what your gift to me right now is your questions, right? That's your gift. That's what you do. And so the greatest gift you can give to me today is questions, not giving me your opinion. And that's something I'm not very good at. Does that answer the question?
I think so, mate. I think so. I enjoyed it anyway. Yeah, I think we're probably all a little bit guilty actually of offering our opinion perhaps too early. I was having a conversation with a guy on a podcast a few months back, and he mentioned that he had a podcast, and I was like, "Oh, that's exciting." He's like, "Yeah, I'm a white man with opinions. Of course, I have a podcast." A
It's
nice
a
little.
thing. It's a thing, Chris. It's a thing. The interesting thing for me with our process is that we work with feedback all the time.
Mm,
Okay. And feedback is part of our culture. And number one with feedback is you've got to ask permission. Chris, can I give you feedback? And if the answer's no, then don't give feedback. But so here's an example as a white man in my evolution is that I was co-facilitating with one of our facilitators one day, and we had a young Asian woman in the team, and I made a joke, and I thought it was funny. It was certainly funny from where I'd come from. And Sarah Tucker is one of our teammates, took me aside half an hour or so later, and she said, Harv, if you want to grow the diversity of collective intelligence, you're going to have to drop this shit. And the joke was racist, right? Now, I hadn't thought I was being racist. I thought I was just being funny, but it was racist. And Sarah gave me feedback. And she asked permission first. That had a profound effect on me. And I'm still a racist, and I'm still sexist, and I'm working on it all the time. And I've been called out for being an ageist. I've been called out with all sorts of stuff. But that's the I feel very, very safe in our culture, because if I'm a dick, somebody will call me out on it at some point, and it gives me a huge amount of security that I'm not going to venture too far down the path without being called out. And I think that's really important in any culture, Chris, is that people will have the right to give you feedback and to be able to adjust your behavior. Because if we don't evolve, and I think I can almost pick people who are in a homophily where there's just surrounded by people saying the same shit and they're not evolving. And I look at them and go, oh, and so I think, for me, being in a loop of, if you're going to be involved with diversity, you've got to have feedback, because you're going to stumble. Diversity is hard work, and it is magic, all wrapped up together. And if you're going to, then comes an inclusion, all that sort of, and we don't even talk about diversity now. We don't talk about inclusion. It's just stuff we practice. But we have these biases. All of us have these biases that need pointing out from time to time.
mm. Yeah, I think there's so many of them that are completely unconscious for us, that it's not until someone points something out to us and continues to point out our biases that we can start to address them, and we can start to look at them. And yeah, I guess I kind of think of myself as going through a similar process as well, as that things that I used to think were funny definitely aren't funny now. It'd be interesting to look at the things that I think are funny right now and see in 5 years' time where does that leave me. But I think, yeah, 100% it's that continual work and continual feedback that you get to confront your biases and to continue to evolve. And I'm going to segue here, Harv, and back to collective intelligence. You guys have been through a big evolution yourselves over the last sort of 18 months, 2-year period. What what triggered that for you? What started the thought process around we want to make some big changes now, or we need to make some changes?
2 years ago, board meeting about this time of year, and this is part of our culture, Chris, is that I presented to the board. It was a very emotional report because I was stuck and I was just frustrated. I was frustrated with myself. I was frustrated with where the business was at, and I didn't know what to do. And I put my resignation to the board, and they went, "Well, you can't resign. You're the founder. You're not going anywhere, and we can't afford to replace you anyway. So you're not going anywhere." And it was that discomfort. And I'm not addicted to discomfort because the reality is it's not something that you really crave. I think some athletes do. They get a kick out of stuff,
Mm.
but but I do know discomfort is a wonderful thing because it's a signal and you can't ignore it. And I was just sitting there going, this just feels like crap. So we're developing a new model called impact teams. So collective intelligence has been working with individuals. It's about helping people be. It's helping with people, working with people like you, developing the individual. And through lockdown in 2020, I might get my years mixed up now, but I thought, you know what, we could actually morph this model and move into the consulting space, but with a non-consulting methodology, and use diverse teams to help companies develop. So I thought we could, and we were just rolling this out and trialing it. And I said to the board, let's use it on ourselves next year. Let's bring an impact team on ourselves. And so they came in, I think it was late March or April 2021, and they came in for 2.5 days and interrogated everything about the business. So it was mostly our members. We used an outside facilitator and we handpicked a crew, and they came in and we go through a process of interviewing people, and they interviewed the board and members and customers and staff and myself and a whole range of things. And then they came back with this. They came back with this bloody report here. And it was pretty unflattering report. And I got my ass kicked, and came back with some great questions and great thoughts. Didn't tell us what to do. And I reported back a month later, and then 3 months later. And then just the other day, we gave our final report back to them. So that was the catalyst. And the catalyst was, how do we move to collective intelligence 2.0? And so as the founder, I've been a benevolent dictator in the business, and I've been the center of all things, and we've developed a great team. And how do we move me out of the business, out of being in the center of everything? And I had 2 questions from the impact team. And one was from a young guy, Hans Kim, and Hans is one of our scholarship, Korean guy, crazy smart. And it was just a sort of question of, Harv, where's this thing going? And that really hit my heart. So I went, yeah, where's this thing going? And the other one was from a terrifyingly smart woman called Maria King, who is deeply spiritual with a science base, and is just, she pushes my button, something terrible. And she said, Harv, I think, it was a statement initially, I think you're treating collective intelligence like a traditional farmer. And what would happen if you treated it like a regenerative farmer? And that got under my skin, Chris, and I lost sleep for 6 weeks. That question, that challenge, I just could not shake because I knew she was onto something. 5 years ago, which she knew, I've started practicing regenerative farming, which is vastly different than traditional farming. Traditional farming is all about control, and it's about monocultures and monocrops, and it's all about control. It's about using artificial fertilizers and all that sort of carry on. Regenerative is about diversity. It's about nature. It's about the system feeding itself. It's about building on the soil and that sort of stuff. And 6 weeks later, I was sitting on the red couch doodling, talking to Michelle, who is the I was going to kind of say, what is Michelle now? She runs the business. And I was doodling, sitting there, and I was drawing these rings. And I said, our team's like mycelium rings. And those mycelium rings, then we started talking about the growth above the ground that we see with the members. And I went, we could create a human ecosystem. We could create a human ecosystem modeled off nature. We could create a regenerative ecosystem. We could do that. And from there, we've been working on that for the last 15 months. And we've been interviewing members, and it's taken a long, long time, not my style, gone very, very slow. Some of our directors, Mark and Andrea, interviewed a whole bunch of members. What does it mean to them? Getting the vision from them, not from me. And then going through this wonderful, slow rebrand process. We've developed our own music. We've had a wonderful piece of art done by a Māori artist. And we've realised that our model, collective intelligence, is actually based off Indigenous practice. So Māori have been using collective intelligence forever, as many Indigenous cultures have, if not all. And so we've been on a journey of introspection and study and reading and relearning. And we launched last week. And what's been wonderful is that the rebrand, this artwork, the music, none of it's been done by me. And the first piece that was done was the music. And we gave our vision to a couple of artists, and they came back with this music for us. And I was so emotional listening to the music going, that's what we sound like. And then seeing this piece of art created for us by Peter Butler, which the public aren't going to see. It's our gift to us. It gets seen. The members will see it, but that has then developed into our new brand work. And they've taken that art and they've turned it into brand work. And from there, a whole lot of new models have been created and new offerings that the members have asked for. And so the dictator has stepped back and let other people develop stuff. And it's been wonderful.
Firstly, congratulations, Harv. That's exciting, mate, that it's launched properly last week. It's been wonderful, but I'm sure it's also been challenging at times as well.
Yep.
How have you potentially the letting go process as well as moving from being in the center to kind of stepping to a different position at the moment? How have you wrapped your head around that?
I haven't wrapped my head around it. I've wrapped my heart around it. There's a big difference, right? No, I'm being a twat. Of course, it's my head as well. So I think connecting the dots is really important, Chris. I think I'm quite good at connecting dots. I go back 2 years ago and go, the catalyst was just absolutely frustrated, stalled. And then those two questions of the impact team from Maria and Hans, and then working on that. And I know from 15 years of collective intelligence, the thing I do know is when it's uncomfortable, don't deviate from that. Sit in the discomfort. Don't deflect it. And if you lose sleep from it, so be it. And immerse yourself. And that morning, sitting on the red couch with Michelle, that was the moment everything changed. And from there, I'm not going to say it's been easy, but it's been way easier than I thought it would be. Yep. Because the thrill for me is that, as a founder, it's your baby, it's your passion, And to see other people as passionate about the future of collective intelligence as I am is really thrilling, humbling, and not something I ever dreamt of. And our Maori members, of course, if you're going to have a vision, it's got to be 100-year plus vision, 100-year plus vision. Not just like, oh no, because I'm used to 5-year visions, 10-year visions, right? That's the white man type thing. You'll have a vision for, and then we'll change it. And so they said, because Māori have been a huge influencer in the business for a long time. And so they came back and said, right, so the vision needs to be a 100-year vision. So the hardest parts were 2 years ago, and then last April 2021. Those were the most difficult things. And then from there, it has been just about enabling people to do the work, enabling people, selecting the team. It got messy a few times. We got stuck a few times. Michelle is a magnificent project manager. In June, she kicked me out of the way because I was trying to project manage stuff I was no good at. And she just went, you've got to get out of this. And was quite direct and brutal and said, you are holding this up. I went, okay. And from there, she's just brought all these different threads together, and she's got one of these brains that, and so they were the 3 moments, and then from there, it's just rolled. When I finally got out of the way or pushed out of the way in June, the things rolled really well. And the new website goes up on the 23rd of December on time. This has been a big investment for us because it's been lots of technology behind the scene as well. Won't get into the detail, but different platforms, different systems being put together. And Michelle's brought it together on time and it's slightly over budget, but bugger all, maybe 5%. Wicked work. And everything's done on the shoestring with us. And I think that helps because it really forces you to be creative. And I think if we had 5 times the budget, we wouldn't have done a better job. Can I read you out a vision?
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, what is the vision?
So, and I'm going to read it because it's new. It's new. It's not new. It's been around 12 months, actually. But I haven't learned it off by heart. So, collective intelligence is a diverse, one-of-a-kind human ecosystem that takes inspiration from Mother Nature to grow more grounded people, more emotionally intelligent leaders, and more future-focused and resourceful communities. It's our 100-year vision. And
cool.
The thing with that is that it allows us to do a wide range of activities in that. But and why is that important? Because when it's a 100-year vision, when it's inspired by nature, you need to be able to go about your work without harming the environment and harming people. Because the actions you have now, you're accountable for in 20 years' time, in 50 years' time. And so it makes you reflect, is this a short-term thing where we could get an immediate reward for? Are we going to be proud of this in 50 years' time when we look back? So it has made us a lot more reflective about our actions, a lot more considered, a lot more conversation awareness. Yeah.
Awesome, mate. Thank you for sharing that. Harv, it's been great to chat with you around this stuff and kind of hear the journey and hear the evolution. One of the things that you talk about is being curious about ourselves and about our evolution. Wondering if you could speak to the importance of curiosity and maybe some of the limitations of curiosity when it comes to trying to facilitate our own evolution. Because this is a time of year. We're recording this in December. This will probably go up either end of December or start of January. A lot of people are thinking about, how do I evolve next year?
And once again, it's one of those sciences, Chris, that I know I'm just skimming the tip of. The interesting thing of curiosity, people talk about it. Curiosity is great. It can be a lovely plaything until you find something you don't like. And then what do you do? So I say curiosity without bravery is just a plaything. Because when you find something you don't like, what are you going to do with that? When you get a piece of feedback you don't like, piece of information, or you start delving into something and you hear something you don't like, you can either go, this is off track there, or I don't agree with that, or right, and you just bounce off that and you move on to the next thing. Or you sit there and go, oh, that's uncomfortable. And once again, staying with the discomfort. So, and I've realized there are lots and lots of different forms of curiosity. And I would say that I'm developing more around, especially with social media, it's very easy to be curious and go and look for things that you like, because the feed will give you stuff that you like, right? But what happens when you go looking for stuff you don't like? Or you see a title and you go, well, I don't agree with that. Do you read it or not? So I read a lot, and I am continually looking for things that I might not agree with and go and read that. And the number of times in the past, Chris, that I have somebody said something to me and I've disagreed with them, I might not have verbalized that, but I thought, oh, yeah, that's right. And then 2 or 3 years later, I go, oh my God, they were spot on. But at the time, I thought they were full of shit. Right? And it's great just going, oh, Chris is full of shit. I don't have to listen to that. Right? That's cool. I don't have to do any work. But there's elements of truth all over the place. And then I talk about truth. What is the truth? Truth is just is a perception, right? Because your truth is different than my truth.
Mm-hmm.
And people that listen to this podcast, everybody's going to hear different things. And people are going to listen to this and go, that old white dick is just full of crap. And other people go, he's really interesting. Same, just depends where they come from. Right? So we know all that, but it's then, I think that the thing, if you want to give any power to curiosity, is dig into the stuff that is uncomfortable or you disagree with and go searching in there and keep looking and keep an open mind that they might just have a point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I had a conversation. So I just, and while I'm thinking about this, having Maori in councils now, and there was the mayor up in north of Auckland, forgotten where it is now, should remember, and he wouldn't yet let the Maori councillor give karakia at the beginning of the meeting, right? And I'm thinking, brother, what are you doing? This is a gift. She is giving you a gift of karakia. And I got in a wee debate with some people on social media when they go, oh, it's just rubbish. And why would you do that? And I just quietly poked the bear and I said, we've been using karakia now for about 3 years. Now meetings go way better as a result of karakia. And they just, and in the end, the chair has quietly changed his mind and so forth. I'm going, it's 2022. We're supposed to be trying to honour the treaty. And this young woman is giving you a gift and you're shutting it down. And it's things like that. We need to go, I wasn't expecting that. That's really uncomfortable. And okay, so what I need to learn here?
Yeah, I
So,
think that's a great question when you hit those uncomfortable feelings is what do I need to learn here, or why is that uncomfortable for me? And it gives you that kind of impetus for unlocking some of those unconscious biases that you have, and then going on and addressing them and allowing yourself to evolve from them, doesn't it?
I mean, the protests in Wellington this year were fascinating, right? It was really easy to go, they're stupid, I disagree with them, or the opposite, they're fabulous crusaders, or but nothing is black and white. Everything is complex. And I think as soon as we try and simplify a complex thing to make ourselves feel better, we've missed the point. And the protests were really complex, really complex. And what's going on there? What's going on for people? What's going on for society? And right now with the crime levels in the country, let's get tough on crime. Let's get tough on crime.
Mm.
Well, if you've read about that, it's never worked. So I read a couple of books this year on the gangs of New Zealand, and one by Jared Savage and one by another Jared, I can't remember his name. Just having gangs in New Zealand is complex. And getting tough on crime or getting tough on gangs, it's actually never worked. It just hardens the gangs up, increases the gang numbers. They're antisocial anyway. So make them more antisocial, that's their game. And coming out with simplistic answers to complex things misses the point. And life is really complex. You and I are really complex. And we need to acknowledge the complexity. And it means that we might not understand. And that sucks sometimes, just going, I don't know what's going on here. You know, the protests caught me by surprise. I didn't know there was that level of discomfort with people around the country. And now we could see it. It was out in the open. We could see the discomfort. We could see how angry people were. We could see how they were upset they were. And it wasn't just about the vaccine. It was about all sorts of stuff that they were upset about. And they had a place to go and protest. And we're in a democracy and they're allowed to do that. And that's a good thing that they can protest. And I didn't agree with a lot of those people's views. But that doesn't make them my enemy. And so I need to have some compassion for them. And I struggle with that sometimes, Chris. Personally, I struggle with that sometimes. But people inherently, I believe, are good. And we need to acknowledge that first. Their behavior we might not like, but inherently they're good. So it's, I would encourage people through the holiday period that rather than getting uptight about stuff and going, those people are bad or whatever is going on, getting curious and going, what's going on there for those people? Wonder what's fueling this?
Mm.
And rather than passing judgment, keeping an open mind.
Yeah. I always ask people at the end, Harv, to leave us with a challenge. And I think you've just done that without me having to ask that question. And if you don't mind, I would like to actually take that a little bit further. I think it's wonderful when we do it in the scope of other people as well. But I think we can also do it with ourselves as well, as that what asking ourselves that question is what is going on there, and paying a little bit more attention to what's happening to yourself as well, rather than just kind of rolling rolling through with it. Mate, it's been an amazing conversation. Thankfully, you have done most of it, so my voice has been able to hold up with it too, which is great. If people are interested in collective intelligence, mate, if people are interested in you, is there a place that they can go and learn some more about it, to find out more, to connect with you?
Thank you. So the new website goes up on the 23rd of December, so it'll be most probably up before this goes to air. And so just collectiveintelligence.co.nz. The wonderful thing is now, Chris, with the new evolution, before we only had one offering, but now we've got 3 or 4. So there's lots of different ways people can engage with us, which we've put a lot of time and thought and effort into, and those are on the website. And so there's now different levels, different ways to connect, to belong to collective intelligence, and just reach out on the via the website. You can find me on LinkedIn, they can make contact there. And we're really excited. We're really excited about the future. We're working on some really interesting projects. We've got a new model where we are applying our diverse teams to solving some really wicked problems. One of the teams working at the moment is looking at how to bring a gold standard to paediatric palliative care to New Zealand. At the moment, we don't have one. And hopefully in 2023, we will be trialling the first gold standard, or close to, in Wellington, Wairapa, Otaki area for paediatric palliative care. So this is something that we are wanting the government to fund long term. We've got some private funding. We're looking at some new models supporting a wonderful doctor, Amanda Evans, who's based in Wellington. And we're looking to turn our teams to solving some really wicked problems for New Zealand. And this first one, it'll affect about 280 families a year in New Zealand, which is a really small number, but it's a really big number if it's your family. And so, yeah, it's things like that, diverse teams are wickedly capable of creating new paradigms and breaking through new areas. So, and the wonderful thing is Starship Hospital is engaged with us and working on the team now as well. And yes, I'm really excited about more of those projects coming to light. But yep, you can find us on the interweb and just reach out there and you'll find us. Yeah.
Awesome, Harv. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, for sharing your journey, and the vision for the future as well. I think you're doing some amazing stuff, and working on, as you said, some really important problems as well. Harv, thanks so much for getting uncomfortable with me today, mate.
Pleasure. Pleasure. It's been an absolute privilege. Thank you, Chris.